The Sixers had their starters in, but with nothing to play for, were easily beaten by the Heat in a blowout win where Miami shot over 46% from three. Can the Heat keep it going with just 2 games left in the regular season? And will they be able to avoid the play-in tournament altogether? We break down the game, who stepped up, and check Miami's current place in the standings on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in, YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. The Heat cruised to a win over the 76ers, beating them 129-101. They used the 2-3 zone to slow down Joel Embiid, dusted that old scheme off. They made 46.2% of their three-pointers. They had been shooting 37% on threes over their last 10 games coming into this game. Feels like they've been okay there. But the defense coming into this game hadn't been great, kind of by choice, kind of just what it is. Was not the story tonight. The defense is really good. I mentioned a 2-3 zone. I know the 76ers sleepwalked through this one, but I thought the Heat closed the door on the Sixers early, did not let them get back into the game after they opened up an early lead. It was a brief 76ers run there in the middle, but the Heat went on a quick 10-0 run after that, shut the door, whatever. Great overall win, took care of business. What did you think of this one, David?
Really strange game. Miami still actively trying to pursue the 6th seed. What are they, a half game back of the Brooklyn Nets currently in the standings? And at the same time, it was hard to know exactly what the Sixers would think of tonight's game. Like, they don't have anything to play for, and yet their starters were in, which is kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah, they're locked into the 3 seed for
they're locked in the 3 seed. Embiid and Harden, two guys that are notoriously known for lacking either stamina, energy, or fighting off injury late in the postseason, and you're putting them out there in what was essentially a meaningless game for them, and yet they played, if not heavy minutes, they started the first and third quarters. They played, basic starters minutes until it was pretty clear that Miami was going to be cruising to a blowout midway through the third quarter.
27 minutes for Harden, 30 minutes for Joel Embiid. Yeah,
that's unusual. At the same time, Miami looked like they were really active and engaged. Like, they had a great rotation. Their lineup changes were fantastic. They were able to shoot well from the perimeter. They were aggressive in attacking Embiid, the paint, the basket in general. They got contributions up and down from almost every player. Had a moment here and there where they really stepped up, and they looked like they were actively invested in winning tonight's game. And it led to what was a strange sight for Miami, a blowout, something we haven't seen very often this season. So it's a really good performance from Miami, but it's hard to gauge it completely given the fact that Philadelphia probably wasn't active and engaged themselves, and they weren't playing for anything. So I'm not sure how much of Philadelphia they were invested in tonight's game, and Miami just happened to do everything very, very well. I like the defensive effort in particular. I know you mentioned the zone, and it just seemed like it really changed things. It confused them enough to the point where they couldn't just do what they normally do in order to make this game a lot closer. And Miami was able to build an 18-point lead early on, cruise to a 21-point lead at the half, and then their lead got as big as 25 at one point. They just really dominated, if not from start to finish, for most of the game.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was, the game was tied early in the first quarter, right? The Heat then went on their run. It was, what was it? It was like 31 to something, 31 to 12
runs.
at the end, but it was a 31 to 12 run, kind of bridging the first and second quarters. They go up by 18 points. The Sixers make a little bit of a comeback. Jimmy Butler comes in, scores 7 straight points. The Heat ended up leading by as many as 33. I mean, this game was never, after it was initially tied midway through the first quarter, it was never close after that. I mean, it wasn't wire to wire, but it felt like it. It was certainly a comfortable one.
And yet Miami, look, I mean, we should, they've been giving up these leads pretty consistently all season. I don't think any Heat fan was secure in this win. Yeah. In the third quarter, where they closed that gap to 15, and they seem to have a little momentum. I think James Harden hit a couple of threes, and it looked like, well, here it comes. And then Max Strus who had just exited the game from what I thought was going to be a long-term injury. He looked like he took a shot across the hand and maybe either dislocated a thumb or sprained something. We'll see whether or not he's able to bounce back. I'm sure at this point they're probably just doing preliminary testing and things of that sort. But he came back, hit 2 back-to-back threes, and then Tyler Herro built off of that, hit a couple threes of his own, able to extend that lead even further. And from that point, Philadelphia just said, "Okay, that's enough. We're kind of done here."
Yeah, and I don't mean to dismiss this win as if something like the 76ers lost more than the Heat won. The Heat went out and grabbed this game. They came in with a polished game plan. I mentioned they dusted off that 2-3 zone. I thought it was exactly what they had to do, considering that they were still going with that small lineup with Max Strus at, power forward or whatever we're really calling it, because Jimmy Butler will not be called a power forward. But they come back out with this 3-guard micro lineup that they've been using over the last 3 games. And they go back to that zone. And I thought it wasn't just the fact that it was zone. It was whenever Joel Embiid caught the ball in the middle of the floor in that kind of high post position where he wants to do all the facilitating or kind of get to his jab step. I mean, I don't know that there's anybody in the league better at that triple threat spot than Joel Embiid is, or at least more threatening from there than he is.
Sure.
And when they come out in that 2-3 zone, it was built so that when Embiid caught it at his sweet spot, that basically you had 4 or 5 guys pinching in at once immediately at the catch. Not like first or second dribble, not when he made a move. When he caught the ball, they pinched in immediately, forced the ball out of his hands. Joel Embiid had only 2 assists tonight. I think he didn't have any in the first half. His 2 assists came during that little third quarter spurt that the Sixers went on. That's a huge stat for the Miami Heat, because if Embiid is not getting going himself, where he only had 21 points tonight on 13 shots and only 2 assists overall, like, that's just not effective. That is far and away from his MVP level. He's averaging more than 33 points a game this year and definitely more assists. So I thought that the defensive execution and the game plan was solid. It also put Miami in position when Joel Embiid kicked out, because they're in that zone. All of Philadelphia's shooters were right in front of them. So when Embiid did kick out, the closeouts were simple. It was simple reads. We just heard about how hard of a time the Heat have had with communicating on defense and all these things. Did not seem to be the case tonight. They knew exactly what it is that they wanted to do. They rendered James Harden useless. 14 points on 12 shots, 3 turnovers. I tweeted during the game, I thought that the Sixers were playing their dudes. I haven't even seen James Harden yet. That was a joke. But it was like, I think that the Heat get a lot of credit for what it is that they were able to do in a mismatch. The Sixers are awesome, okay? Joel Embiid is probably going to win MVP. And I know that they were sleepwalking from this game. There wasn't a lot of urgency. There wasn't a lot of force that the Sixers played with. But you do got to give credit to Miami for knocking them off their square and keeping them off of it.
Yeah. No Tyrese Maxey tonight. I talked about in our preview in yesterday's episode that I thought he could be dangerous, but he was sitting out, might not play for the rest of the regular season. So that's certainly an advantage that the Sixers did not have against the Heat. His just overall style of play, attacking that zone, he probably would have been much more dangerous, and he just doesn't seem as
he's kind of their
shaken
zone buster
by the zone. Yeah, he's not as shaken by it as, say, Harden or Embiid, certainly.
Because they're both so much like more like they slow down the game. They're kind of pragmatic in the way that they approach. Like Maxey's just like, give me the ball, I'm going to go. Like, and they didn't have that. And then Miami's pace overall,
yes,
very.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, yeah. No, I was just going to say a number of times where they just were looking to push broadcast team on TNT, pointing it out that Miami, while not a fast team, obviously was looking to just get a step or two ahead of the defense on a lot of possessions there. And it led to a lot of those baskets, especially in the second quarter when they were starting to pull away more and more, as that zone defense led to some uncomfortable possessions for Philadelphia, or forced into a turnover or a foul in some situations. They just pushed the ball, no resting, just trying to get ahead of them and get an easier look at the basket, and led to a number of open opportunities for Miami.
Yeah, 4 different Heat players finishing with at least 2 3-pointers, a convincing Heat win. I don't even know that we have enough credit cookies appropriate for this one. We're going to talk about that next. We're going to do our best. But first, David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by the new Nissan Ariya, Nissan's most electric player of the week. They're brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. Sorry, I mispronounced it the first time. Identify the player of the week. Well, it's easy. It's Jimmy Butler. After a fantastic performance against the Detroit Pistons and a yet another efficient performance in limited minutes tonight against the Philadelphia 76ers. Great performance against the Mavs on Saturday, too. He's been pretty clearly the Heat Player of the Week. Well, since the All-Star break, if not for most of the
Last like
regular
2 or
season.
3 weeks. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
averaging 25 points per game on 64% shooting in his last 8 games. That's wild. That's like LeBron James 2013, 2012 kind of numbers.
and look, he's going to get the All-NBA nod. Don't forget, it started here. We got that.
Right.
We got that starting early on. We got it
Yeah, we did.
rolling, and Jimmy Butler has been excellent. And speaking of excellence, you're going to find all that in the Nissan Aria, an electric performance, just like Jimmy's 18-point fourth quarter against the Detroit Pistons. Brilliantly fierce. You could describe Jimmy easily that way. Attacking the basket, doing everything he needs to do. He understands everything you could possibly have to do in a certain situation in order to get the best performance. And you want the best performance where you're going to get it at the Nissan Aria. The 2023 Nissan Aria packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. You're going to get previous intelligence from Jimmy Butler, that's for sure. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com.
Locked On Heat is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please do subscribe. Well, it's another Heat win, which means it's time to get in the kitchen and whip up some credit cookies. David, what kind of cookies are we whipping up tonight?
I could not think of like a cookie symbolic enough for this win. Again, maybe something with like flat expectations or something, because Miami, again, dominant win, but the Sixers didn't really respond. I don't know, something with maybe like an aftertaste that doesn't really kick it into full gear or something like that. I don't know. Let's just go with a standard chocolate chip cookie. Why not?
Oh, all right. Well, I kind of like a chocolate chip cookie. I feel
Of
like you
course,
just
everybody likes
undersold the
chocolate chip
chocolate
cookie.
chip. Uh,
Yeah, I know.
Should mention this is the first time that the Heat have won 3 straight in about 2 months.
Huh. Just the right time. At just the right time when Miami really needs to seal together.
So we mentioned Jimmy Butler there. We got to start there. 24 points, 9 of 12 shooting, 6 assists, 3 rebounds. I just thought he was so in control of the game. Like there was a moment there again in the third quarter when the Sixers kind of made a little push, got it back into with 15, and Jimmy Butler just went out and scored 7 straight points.
Yeah.
And it was just that kind of thing where Jimmy was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this be another Pistons kind of thing where I have to do it in the final 5 minutes. I'm just going to take care of it now. I'm going to shut the door on this thing. That's exactly what happened. And nobody's starters basically played the entire fourth quarter. So, yeah, Jimmy, we start there. We got to get to so many other guys, though. Max Strus, 4 of 8 from 3-point range.
Can I just say one more thing about Jimmy before we move on?
Sure.
I love his ability to handle the switch onto Embiid. And I'm not sure if it's by virtue of just his overall defensive tenacity or the fact that he played together. He knows exactly how to use his physicality and leverage to try and challenge Embiid. No one's going to stop Embiid. Neither does Jimmy. Neither does Bam, who's a great defender, obviously. But at the same time, he does, for considering the weight and height disparity, he challenges him as good as any wing player in the NBA. And I think he deserves credit for that.
Yeah, I was actually surprised by how willingly Miami switched everything.
Mm-hmm. With Jimmy, it makes it a lot more easy. That's the whole thing. We saw it in the playoffs last year. We've seen it on more than a few occasions from him. He handles that matchup extremely well, given the clear disadvantage.
So 1, 2, 3. I think I have 5 guys that I want to give credit cookies to. Is that? I don't even know if that's enough. 5? 5 feels right.
I saw somebody suggest something, and it wasn't corny. Whoever suggested it, they said give some to the whole team. I'd love to do that. It's also not mathematically feasible, especially not for this exercise. We've done it all season long. We can't just say a team-wide cookie.
I don't know. 10 guys played real minutes. Duncan, Jamal Cain, and Yurtseven played garbage time minutes. So, no, that's 9 guys. So we can give.
Eric Spoelstra could get a cookie too.
Yeah, or I was going to think just give Jimmy 2 of them and then 1 to everybody else.
No, I think Spo deserves one. Like I liked his calm in there, and the fact that he used his zone. He didn't crumble. He kept everybody engaged. The 9 players that actively played, aside from the 3 in garbage time, and 1 for Eric Spoelstra is fine.
I don't know.
I like it.
Is it?
I think Jimmy has a great performance, but
yeah.
Again,
I don't know. Caleb was fine, but I don't know that he gets credit cookies. Like Haywood High.
I liked his performance.
I liked it.
He had a couple 3-pointers.
Cookie worthy.
Yeah, on any other game, again, this is so hard to read.
10 shots.
Like we want to give credit, and at the same time, it's hard to give credit 100%. I feel like if this was just a regular win, 15, 20 games ago, we would all be like gushing. Oh, this is it, Miami about to turn it around. We can't say that for certain because we've fallen into that same trap as a lot of Heat fans have of not, expecting that Miami's going to be able to build off this and be consistent with this. That's not the case. On top of all that, it's the fact that we described in the first segment that Philadelphia clearly wasn't at 100% mentally, emotionally. They weren't playing for
Yes.
anything at all. And so how much credit can you actually give Miami or any one individual player? Tyler had a solid night. Kevin Love with his 4 drawn charges had a great night.
And laughing after that fourth one, just being like, "Look, I'm just
Pointing.
going to keep doing this."
Pointing. He's going to get money. He's pointing to the bench. He's saying, "I'm going to get paid for all those charges they take." Absolutely.
Maybe, yeah. I wonder if the Heat have some sort of like inside kind of thing.
Oh, I think they do. I think he was referring to it. I think I saw him rubbing his fingers together, a la Luka Doncic.
Yeah, it's like $100 per charge or something.
Something like that.
Whatever it is.
He'll take it.
Whatever makes
It's
an
so
NBA
funny.
player
Like they have no need of this money, but like the idea of getting what amounts to basically a handful of quarters for an NBA player, it's like, yeah, give it to me. All the free money, wherever I can get it.
Whatever. More some cash to buy some more credit cookies. I'm okay. I'm okay with giving it to the whole team. I just feel like, look, we've got 2 games left after this one. We're gonna post the final tally of cookies and blame pie at the end of the year. So I feel like I don't want to be just sort of like, feels good, everybody gets a cookie kind of thing. Because I the cookies matter. Like if you're not, I don't know what the Heat are really playing for this year. This is a nice win. I don't know what they're really playing for this year, other than these cookies. So I want to take this very seriously.
I can tell you they're not playing for our fictitious award here either.
Have you asked?
I mean, we have confirmation that at the very least one Heat player listens to the podcast, right?
And he has not gotten. How many cookies does Nikola Jovic have? He's got 0.
I
Zero
think
cookies
he has 0 cookies
because
because
he doesn't play. Jimmy Butler right now is in the lead with credit cookies. That should not be surprising. Bam is not far behind, and there's a pretty sizable gap between those two and everybody else: Tyler, Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, the like of those guys. If you really feel strongly about giving one cookie to everybody, I'm down. But I do think it would be a disservice to Jimmy and Tyler, who really stepped up, I thought, in a more meaningful way than everybody else. Is that fair?
Let me see. Who do we bump off the cookie then? Like who doesn't get it?
Gabe.
Gabe doesn't get a cookie.
Yeah, it was like three to Jimmy, 3 to Tyler,
Oof.
2 to Strus, 6, 7, 8, 1 to Kevin Love. And Bam
was good.
Bam was good. All right, so maybe 2 to Herro. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
This is hard. 2 to Jimmy, 2 to Herro. All right, so Jimmy gets 2, Tyler gets 2.
No Haywood Highsmith. Come on.
Strus gets 1, Love gets 1, Lowry gets 1. Bam.
He was the key to the zone. Like he was so good at it. Like
Sure.
the rotations were great. If he'd hit that 1 3-pointer in transition, like his first shot of the game, I think he would get at least 4 cookies on the night.
So Haywood gets 1, Bam gets 1, Lowry gets 1, Love
getting
gets
complicated.
1, Strus gets 1. It's 1 at a time. How complicated? Even I can do this math. Herro gets 2 and Jimmy gets 2, which means we get 1 left over. So we can give Jimmy an extra 1. We can give Tyler an extra 1. We can give Max an extra 1. Like we can go we got 1 more. I don't think that another player deserves a credit.
Spo.
For what?
For using the zone, for going to Haywood Highsmith.
Fair enough.
For recognizing exactly what was at stake and getting the right personnel out there in order to execute the game.
Somehow that's Spo's first credit cookie for the year, so I feel like we've already screwed this thing up.
We have? Wow. I thought he'd gotten 1 at some point.
Oh.
I've got to check the math there. I don't know. The same guy who assigns and records, keeps the tally for these credit cookies is the one who did the Heat culture bracket. And I don't know if that math always checks out.
I think that's true because I do the cookies, but I don't know who did the bracket. So
it was the same guy. A peek behind the curtain for all our listeners and viewers. But yeah, we'll talk about whether or not the Heat actually are a good opponent to face the Philadelphia 76ers if they do wind up meeting in the playoffs. Are the Sixers trying to duck Miami actively? We'll talk about that in the next segment. But before we do that, just a reminder that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here. Now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's a bonus bet back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes range. Who would have predicted that Miami would shoot 46% against the Sixers defense? Well, if you had that prediction, you probably won yourself a lot of money tonight. So congratulations to you. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet. Again, one up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
You can reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram. You can email us at lockedonheat@gmail.com. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions to the post-game show using the hashtag AskLOHeat. We will get to whether or not the 76ers were trying to duck the Miami Heat in the first round. But before we do that, let's get to this question from Steve, who writes in, when was the last time that the Miami Heat really buried an opponent? Thought it was an interesting question. I looked up at the schedule. It's been a minute, David. January 18th, the Heat beat the Pelicans 124-98. They did have a blowout win after that against the Grizzlies, but that was a little bit more. That was a little bit more back and forth, though. I kind of remember in the first half. This one just felt over, like in the second quarter. This one just felt over, and that's kind of and so to the extreme of a blowout like this, that's how that Pelicans game felt. So it's not to say it wasn't like that blowout win was against the Grizzlies, but this one just felt even more of a blowout, if that makes any sense.
No, I completely agree. That blowout, too. If I recall correctly, Desmond Bane was ejected for punching Kevin Love in the undercarriage. No Ja Morant, who had been sitting out due to suspension. Steven Adams, he was out as well due to injury. So they were missing a couple key players. The Pelicans, obviously, without Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, but I think they were looking to win, and they had won a number of games up to that point, but Miami just embarrassed them and made them look really bad. A lot of people claiming South Beach flu was the reason for that loss, but it didn't seem that way at the time.
No, I would blame the fact that they didn't have their best players. Yeah,
that's
probably
that's always
deal.
that helps certainly.
That was the last time. That was the last time I can remember a blowout quite like this one. Stan Van Gundy did say repeatedly during the broadcast that the 76ers should not want to play the Heat in the first round of the playoffs. They could have avoided it with a win tonight. Instead, there's still a chance that they can meet. If the Heat win out and the Brooklyn Nets lose out, the Heat would get the number 6 seed. So they're not locked into that 7th seed. If they had lost tonight, the Heat would have been locked into the 7th seed. That would have been it. Right. Mathematically, that would have been it. Do you think that the 76ers care about facing the Heat in the first round, given that they had the opportunity to lock them into the play-in tournament? And as you and I have already said, it didn't feel like there was that sense of urgency for them.
Yeah, they probably don't prefer it outwardly, or I'm sure they'd have to admit that given the strengths of Brooklyn or the strengths of the Miami Heat team and the depth and experience of the Miami Heat team, they'd probably prefer facing the Brooklyn team, as good as Mikal Bridges has been. Like, at the same time, you're that good. You're basically going up against yourself at this point. Like it was mentioned during the broadcast, you and I have talked about it before. For the Sixers, what it ultimately comes down to is postseason success. And you're going to have to go through somebody, whether it's Miami, Milwaukee, Boston, whomever. You're going to have to find a way to get, at the very least, to the Eastern Conference Finals, if not the NBA Finals, to prove that this season is something that you can continue to build on. James Harden's free agency up in the air, the future of this team. There's so many different factors in place now. You've been tinkering with a roster around Embiid for years now. You think you've got the right pieces around him, and Harden is certainly a big part of that, but you want to be able to cement that success by proving it at the highest level. And I don't think it matters whether you face Miami or anybody else. Is Miami the tougher opponent than, say, Brooklyn, Chicago, yes, Toronto? Absolutely. That's without a doubt. But I also don't think that they're up at night going, damn, I really don't want to face Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat in a potential next round series or something like that.
Yeah, my thing is, if you were gonna play your starters, why just go out and play? Yeah. Like this was there was like a weird in between this today of, all right, you have an opportunity to shut out the Heat and avoid them in the first round. You are in control of that because, like you said, you would rather just play anybody else that's on the board other than Miami. Go out and do it, and then you can rest and then Embiid, Harden, all these, you can rest the next 2 games because other than this game was meaningless for Philadelphia in terms of the standings. They're locked into that number 3 seed, but meaningful in the sense that you could avoid Miami in the first round if you cared enough. Clearly, they did not. And I'm not blaming them for it. I'm just curious
No.
why they played in the first place. I would be surprised if we
Can I
saw.
offer a theory here? I just thought about,
Okay.
maybe they were so convinced of their own excellence that given Miami's, consistent weaknesses throughout the season, they just thought that having their stars on the floor would
Would be
be
enough. Yeah,
enough to
no,
just
absolutely. Look, that wouldn't be the first time a team overlooked an opponent, right? For sure. That could be definitely part of it. I'm glad that the Sixers decided not to play their guys in the fourth quarter. I was a little shocked that they played them as long as they did in the third quarter. Because they clearly just didn't. I don't know. Was it
Sure.
Embiid and Harden just did they want to be in this game? Was that a message of Doc Rivers being like, we'd rather be healthy? Because if you're the Sixers, the thing that's held you back the last couple of years in the playoffs is not talent, it was health. You know what I mean? And some other things, but mostly health, especially last year. It's
I
like,
wonder if anybody had, like, a bonus tight end for minimum
oh,
games
that's
played or something like
interesting.
that.
Maybe there's something like that. But anyway, so even if the Heat don't win out and the Brooklyn Nets lose out and end up getting the 6th seed that way, because they are still mathematically alive for the 6th seed with this win, there's another
Yeah.
way that they could play the Sixers in the playoffs. And that's if they even if they end up getting the number 7 seed, they come out of the
Right.
play-in tournament
Mhm.
as the 7th seed. You beat Boston in that first round somehow, and then
Sure.
presumably the Sixers beat Brooklyn in that first round series. Then they could potentially meet in the second round. So probably not going to happen, but possible. But possible. So there's definitely some things, and I look at the way that Miami, how they approached defending Joel Embiid, and I know it was not optimum full tilt, full throttle Joel Embiid tonight. But I think, again, I thought the approach was really sound, and that's how they could approach defending Joel Embiid in a potential playoff series. Because Joel Embiid, even this year, is better than the Joel Embiid they play. Joel Embiid last year had a broken face, so that's part of it. But Joel Embiid is much better this year. It's going to take and require a lot of different kinds of looks, not just this 2-3 zone and the pinching
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff we talked about. But I thought they had a really good approach. They did a good job. And who knows? Maybe we see something like this in the playoffs again. And maybe this
Is
game is a little instructive.
is Bam the best individual defender, or is it still Al Horford at this point in time in terms
Well,
of
the
being able
Celtics
to
didn't even
challenge Joel
have
Embiid?
Al Horford guard Joel Embiid when they played the Celtics. They had Grant Williams on him, and it didn't work. Joel
Right.
Embiid went off for 52 points, so maybe they should have Al Horford. But no, it's not Al Horford anymore. I think Brook Lopez does a really good job. Bam
Good
has been
point. You're right.
solid. I would be interested to see a few other players, maybe in like the Western Conference if Philadelphia got that far in the
Mm.
playoffs. But anyway, yeah, look, I did not get the sense tonight that the 76ers were trying to duck the Miami Heat in the first round, to answer the question.
Yeah.
Does that come back to bite them? Who's to say? We'll see. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Hit that like button under the video. Make sure you are following us wherever you get your podcasts. Now make your second listen game to game. NBA, every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.